Welcome to This Week in Health IT. It's Tuesday News Day, where we look at the news which will impact health IT. Today we talk furloughs, field hospitals, and field reports with Drex to Ford. My name is Bill Russell, healthcare CIO coach and creator of This Week in Health IT, a set of podcasts and videos and collaboration events dedicated to developing the next generation of health leaders. This show has channel sponsors and we have episode sponsors. Our channel sponsors have been fantastic. Galen Healthcare, VMware, Starbridge Advisors, ProTalent Advisors, and Health Lyrics have stepped up to support a Slack channel for health systems to collaborate. And they have also connected us with numerous health system leaders who have provided us field reports from the front lines. Many thanks to our channel sponsors. This episode and every episode since we started our COVID-19 series has been sponsored by Sirius Healthcare. They reached out to me to see how we might partner during this time. And that is how we've been able to support producing daily shows for the last 4 weeks. So special thanks to Sirius for supporting these shows and our efforts during the crisis. It's Tuesday News Day, and Drex to Ford is on the line, and we're going to talk a little health IT news. How's it going, Drex?
I'm good, thanks. Man, I'm telling you, you are killing it right now. The content has been terrific. I watched a bunch of episodes this weekend. They're short, they're sweet, they're like compact, loaded with stuff. And the Slack channel has been great too. I have the Slack channel up on my iPad over here all the time, all day, watching the conversation. So thanks for doing this. It's been awesome. I think it's great for everybody.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. And so how have you been keeping yourself busy? I mean, I have the Slack channel, the shows, and you're now recording some shows as well, and you're doing the Slack channel. What other things have you been doing?
Yeah, thanks. So we have, I've been doing some work with David Chow on a couple of different things. And one of the things is we've set up a Wednesday call. We have about 16 health systems. We open up a Zoom meeting and we let it run for about 3.5 hours. And basically have just sort of put the offer out there for several participants to say, just drop in and unload on us, right? So come in and tell us what you're working on and what you haven't figured out and what you wish somebody would come up with and whatever. And then we write those notes up and also dump them into a Slack channel for the people who are participating. And then we burn those episodes. We blow those episodes away. We record them for notes, but we don't actually keep them to broadcast. And it's just, any way that I can, and like you, although I don't have it figured out, I think as well as you have it figured out, but any way that I can help to facilitate crosstalk, I've tried to do that. I actually was on the phone with Russ Branzell this weekend, because I was getting calls from CIOs who were saying, do you know so-and-so's phone number? Because I'd like to talk to them. And, so I've tried to make some of those connections, but for the Chime listeners, just know that you can always call Chime, and they have probably 80% of all the contacts, CIO contacts that are Chime members, and they'll always help you make that connection. So if you call Chime and they can't help you, call me or call Bill. We'll figure it out. We'll help make those connections for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I appreciate your help. We've been doing field reports. I've been interviewing CIOs for the last couple of weeks. And this week I've been asked to expand, and I'm like, well, I can't expand anymore. There's only one of me. There's only one microphone. There's only so much time. And so I reached out to you. You're going to be interviewing a bunch of chief information security officers and doing those field reports. And I'm going to continue talking to some of the CIOs. And actually, what I'd like to do is start off the show. I'm just going to do highlights of just a handful that I've done. And for anybody who's been on, I'm only going to go back for the last 7 days. I'm not going to go way back. And then if you could talk a little about your CISO interviews or even the conference call, what you're learning, that would be great. So we had Steve LeBlond, CTO for Ochsner on, and it was a really good conversation. The thing I appreciated about him is he talked about being in it for the long haul, 7-day schedules for IT, planning for backup IT staff in case they get sick, and caring for the IT staff that is required to be on site. Really good conversation. Dan Nygren, your friend, Boston Children's, he covered telehealth in detail, the use of really telehealth to reduce the amount of contact that nurses are having with COVID-19 patients in the room. I thought that was fascinating. Nader Marabi, the CIO for NYU Langone, I think the thing that was interesting from him for me is even though this crisis is distinct, he talked about how each crisis has prepared us for this. Going back to 9/11, talking about Sandy and how he really was prepared. And I also talked with Ray Lowe and Eric Lee from Ultimed, and I thought the fascinating thing with that is they're with a federally qualified health clinic that does a lot in ambulatory settings. And so they didn't have a wad of cash sitting there to just start throwing, hey, let's throw telehealth up, let's throw this. They had to be judicious with the money, but they also had to move equally fast to serve their community. And those are just some of the quick highlights of four of the, the most recent field reports that we did. And so you've done your first CISO report. What are you hearing out there from a security standpoint?
Well, so I had an opportunity, and I'm assuming it'll probably come out this week, but a conversation with Mitch Parker, who's the CISO at Indiana University Health. And, Mitch is great. I follow him on Twitter. We are we regularly are DMing each other about things that we're seeing. He's, I think, like most organizations, and a lot of CIOs that I talk to right now they have some underlying concern about all of the changes and how fast we've done so many things in the last few weeks, whether it's telemedicine or work from home or, analytics stuff, all the things that we've done to make sure we can support the mission. And a lot of that comes with, sometimes when you go really fast, you accidentally leave yourselves landmines that you step on later. And so I think there's sort of this process now of everybody's tried to keep really good track of all the things that they've done and how they've done them so they can go back and make sure that they haven't left any booby traps. But that's going to be, I think, a process that folks are going to go through. The other thing you talked about was just the amazing amount of spear phishing that's going on right now, from an email perspective, folks that are sending emails that have really good, great detailed information in the email that really makes it super tempting to click on for employees. And the complications that sort of come with that is that, you have folks working from home now and the dog's barking and the kids are yelling and there's music playing in the background and you're distracted. And maybe there's a tendency to click on something that you shouldn't click on. So, that regular drumbeat of be careful. There are bad guys still out there trying to get to you no matter what they say. Because there's actually, some good messaging out there now from some of the hacker organizations saying we're not targeting healthcare. But we know that that's happening. So just be careful. And I'm looking forward to some of the other ones that are coming up too. I won't say who, but I know we've got some other good folks coming up on the CISO series.
We're allowed to let the cat out of the bag for some of this stuff, but let's get to the news. Let's get to the news real quick. I'm getting a bunch of two of these stories I'm getting from 3X Drex. So I appreciate your service, 484848 to Drex. No, that's backward. Drex to 484848. Because if you do the other way, It doesn't really work.
Yeah.
And you get those three text messages during the week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Actually, you say 3 news stories, but invariably it's
it's always more than 3. Yeah. But it just depends. I try to cram in as much as I can. I'm limited to 1,600 characters. So, it can only be so big. There's only so much I can cram in there. And I do my best to get as much in as I can.
Yes, I saw this. The first story is about hospital furloughs. It's a fierce healthcare story. And I'm just going to highlight a couple of them. So Bon Secours talked about they're going to furlough any staff that aren't directly supporting the 43 hospital system response to COVID-19. And Bon Secours they actually say Cincinnati-based organization. So I guess they've decided that they're going to take the Mercy headquarters and not the Bon Secours headquarters, which was in Richmond, I believe. Boston, yeah, it's great. Boston Medical Center is putting 700 employees, or about 10% of its workforce, on furlough. St. Clair Healthcare out of Kentucky is putting 300 workers. Appalachian Regional Healthcare also in Kentucky, 13 hospitals, 6,000 workers, and then Baptist Little Rock. So this, I brought this story up because I think there's a lot of A lot of misinformation, a lot of concern. I know that Intermountain said they were going to do some either staff reductions or reduction in pay, and then you had the CEO come out and clarify that that was not the case, that they were not going to be doing that. But what do you make of this? What do you make of this story and the reductions that are going on?
Yeah, I would say my initial reaction is surprise and um, it's just frustrating that given the situation that we have right now, we need all hands on deck. I understand that not everybody is involved in direct patient care, and that maybe you have to let some of those people go on furloughs so that you can have the resources that were assigned to them to put in other places. Um, I think in 3X Drex today, I said something like, when you treat healthcare systems like businesses, they're going to act like businesses. And that's exactly what's happening right now. That isn't necessarily the best thing for patients and families over the long term. I mean, I've had a CIO, call me and tell me that basically they had to let their project management office staff go. Like they basically cut their whole PMO. And that's a frustrating, dangerous, long-term problem that we're going to have to deal with down the road. And it's just, I don't know, it's a challenge. I think it's a real challenge for health systems and for cultures too, when they start letting people, go on a layoff or a furlough.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't have any problems with them making these decisions because they are businesses today. So they're making decisions as businesses because they are businesses.
Right.
And
right.
And there's risks. You let your entire PMO go, good luck getting them all back. Now, we don't know the whole story. Maybe they were looking at the PMO saying this is a pretty ineffective PMO. I have no idea.
True. There's always more to the story.
Yeah, there's always more to the story. But, but healthcare is interesting. We can we afford to have losers in healthcare? If Macy's fails and they close up all those stores, it's not really going to have much in the way of an impact, although my Macy's credit card bill will be less. But when a local hospital fails because of bad leadership, it really impacts a community. But what is the answer to that? Is the answer, I was talking to somebody earlier today and they said, wow, it's interesting how all the New York hospitals have come together and the government's really running that thing. Do you think New York will take the lead and become, a state-run health system across the board? And I was like, not a chance. No.
I agree with you.
But from a public health standpoint, what they're doing today needs to stay in place and then be built upon, which is they're sharing information on inventories, they're sharing information on beds, they're sharing information on research. Just across the board for the good of the community, by all means, let's get that done. But if we don't do this on a national basis, people in New York, if they want different care, they'll just go to Pennsylvania. You can't do it on a state-by-state basis. It has to be a national basis. But today, it's still business, and I would be speaking out of both sides of my mouth because the first episode this year, I did the J.P. Morgan conference, and I said, I really appreciated the Bon Secours Mercy CEO who has done a couple mergers just amazingly well, a really well-run business. He's really running it well as a business, which gives him the ability to grow and those kind of things. And then a turnaround and he does this reduction. If I were to say, well, how dare he act like a business? So he's doing exactly what he should be doing as a CEO, I think.
Yeah. This isn't an unusual situation, right? I've served on public company boards, and there are times where I know I've talked to friends on other public company boards who have said, we made a decision to send everything to China, which probably wasn't the best decision for the country, but it was the best business decision that I had to make as a board director, because my responsibility is to make sure that shareholders maximize their value. We wind up in this weird situation sometimes where what we are supposed to be doing and what we want to do are diametrically opposed. And I think we're facing some of that right now in healthcare, where we know we have to compete, we know we have to be businesses, but there are times where we need to link arms and say, to hell with all that. we have to, we have to beat back this virus, and we're seeing some of that. Unfortunately, the business aspects of this are causing us to lay people off, may eventually cause hospitals to close. Certainly will put some hospitals and some organizations in positions to be acquired because of the financial stress they're going to see. So there's a lot of shakeout still to come from this.
Do you think I would suspect that a lot of bailout money is going to go towards hospitals.
Yeah.
It'll be in a lot of different forms. One, look, I'm sitting here as a small business owner. I got my little thing in the mail today from Chase, which said, "Hey, if you want to apply for, the coronavirus relief, I forget what it's called, but essentially, they'll help me to pay for payroll, health insurance, and a bunch of other things during the crisis with a 10-year low interest loan, which could potentially be forgiven at a future date." And I'm sitting there going, okay, if they're doing that for me, they absolutely are. The largest employer in every city is the hospital. They're absolutely going to figure out a way to make sure that the hospitals hire. And then eventually what you're going to have is a whole bunch of money coming in from a public health perspective, and a whole new series of IT projects be built around this for sharing this information, creating an analytics framework that supports public health. I mean, I see just a ton of government money coming towards healthcare. Maybe not right now, but soon.
I think that if we look down the road, and you have another item on our list, it's sort of the post-pandemic. What do we do? How do we go through the different phases and eventually come out the other side of this? I think that in that article, when we talk about it, there's some good reasoning behind new capabilities that we're going to need to create to be able to face this when it happens again. And a lot of that's going to be analytics and infrastructure and those kinds of things. The challenge right now, I think in the near term, is that, when I talked to a big health system in the Midwest who told me that they're, losing $150 million a month because they're canceling elective surgeries, or a small hospital in the middle of Ohio that says that they're losing $15 million a week because they've canceled elective surgeries. A lot of these organizations don't have big war chests. They don't have a lot of money in the bank. Days cash on hand isn't really a thing for them in any significant volume. So they only have to go a really short period of time in this situation until they start looking at each other like, I don't know what we're doing. I don't know how we're going to get money to whatever, make pay. That's why you see some of these hard decisions coming now. These are CFOs who are being proactive and saying, I want to make sure we don't get into a situation where we don't have any options.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've called this a reset a couple times, and people have started to resonate with people of saying, hey, you know what, when we come out of this, we're going to look at our entire project set that we have. And I think there's some people that are still sitting there going, hey, we're just going to, eventually we'll come out of this and we'll just start up all the IT projects again. I'm like, no, I think you erase the board and you start putting projects up again and say, okay, based on what we now know, based on what just happened, are we doing the right things, or have certain things taken a new priority? And my guess is towards the second half of this year, we're going to see a whole new set of IT projects and a whole bunch that just sort of go off to the wayside. But that doesn't answer yes, small hospitals, rural hospitals. I would guess that the federal government is going to have to step in here because there is not a quick enough bailout, and there's no buyers during this time frame. They're gonna have to prop up a lot of these health systems. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk to you about a story you put in there as well, standing up and maintaining a field hospital, because you have experience doing this. And this is it's actually an Army on the Army military site, and it's about them standing up the 250 patient Army field hospital in Seattle. What does it take to stand up a field hospital?
Army field hospitals, Army medical units, Air Force has a version of that called expeditionary medical systems. These are prepackaged. They're usually on a fairly regular basis, opened up, exercised, all the expired material or material that has, you know, a lifespan is refreshed and replaced. And they make sure everything works, and then it all goes back together and gets repackaged to be able to ship out, right? Whether it ships out on you know, a C-130 or a C-5 or, you know, whatever the aircraft might be, or it's loaded on trucks and, you know, moved across the country in the case of a disaster. And in this case, that's exactly what's happened. The Army Field Hospital, components of it are coming from Colorado. Major components of it are coming from Joint Base Lewis McChord, just south of Seattle. And they're setting up in the at CenturyLink Field, the home of the Seattle Seahawks. And it's just crazy to think that that is happening in my hometown right now. Their intention is to take non-COVID patients as it stands today. Although we see, even in New York right now, a lot of controversy over whether or not some of those field hospitals will take COVID patients or non-COVID patients. The Army Corps of Engineers are certainly here too, and they're involved in making sure that they have all of the stuff they need to be able to run the utilities, do all the things that they need to make sure that they can run a field hospital. And they can actually do this pretty quickly. I mean, I've deployed 50-bed air transportable hospitals and 250-bed contingency hospitals all over the Middle East. And you can get up and running pretty quickly. In the case of using a building of opportunity like CenturyLink Field, you don't have to put up tents. You don't have to do that part of the infrastructure, so they can go even faster. They're making some actually making some really interesting modifications to the field hospital to put up sort of like privacy walls between the patients, which is something we don't have to worry about in a combat situation. But they're making a lot of additional accommodations, including just making sure there's plenty of spacing between the beds, which again is something we didn't necessarily have to worry about in real field situations.
Well,
and they're making great progress. I mean, they'll be up and running probably in the next few days.
So let me ask you the health IT question. So you're dropping it in CenturyLink Field. So you have, my gosh, it's Paul Allen's home. So you probably have massive network going into that thing. Fiber optic and also, so that's not gonna be an issue. But what, from a data sharing standpoint, so you have, let's say a patient gets transferred from UW or transferred from Swedish into this thing because they're seeing too many COVID patients. How does the medical record follow, and what like EHR would the military be using in that facility?
This is a really good question that I don't think I know the answer to yet, and I've been asking the same question. So the DoD selected Cerner as their electronic health record a year, maybe more or so ago. And Joint Base Lewis McChord was one of the first deployments of Cerner. And so I'm making sort of a theoretical assumption, and if anybody knows anything different, we'd love to hear it, that they're deploying some version or some connectivity back to JBLM to ride on a Cerner infrastructure or on a Cerner EHR. We'll see then how the communication happens between the hospital who may have a patient that's non-COVID and they discharge to the Army hospital. What comes with that patient and how does that data get there? I'm assuming that worst case, they're printing a bunch of stuff and they're going to lash a paper record to the top of the patient, and that's all going to move with them. Hopefully in a better case than that, they're going to somehow figure out how to get electronic data over to the Army. So I'm staying on that one because I really want to know the answer to that question too.
Well, and the other aspect of it is the DoD doesn't have any billing functions whatsoever built into the EHR, is my understanding, because they don't have to. There's no one to bill. So all that whole mechanism really probably doesn't exist in the build itself. So, I mean, anyway, that is an interesting question. But we're seeing these field hospitals. I think one of the things we're going to have to work on before the next pandemic, and hopefully that will not happen in our lifetime, but probably will, the coordination of these field hospitals, how they get stood up, how they get connected in, how information flows around. Because in New York, I mean, there's a whole bunch of them, And some of them have been stood up by the military, some have been stood up by human rights organizations, not human rights, and humanitarian organizations and
Yep.
whatnot.
Yep.
And there's
Right.
just coordination of that. Like, I mean, the story I just read about the ship, it's the Mercy or whatever, that's in
Uh-huh.
New York
Uh-huh.
Harbor, that some COVID patients went there, and there wasn't supposed to be any COVID patients going there. So
Yeah.
that's one of the things that slowed down the whole process of that really coming up to speed.
It's so I mean, just so you know, the military does bill. So they're definitely patients who are seen in military facilities who have third party insurance. So they definitely have a billing function
Okay.
built into that. It'll be interesting to see so many of the rules that we've been granted exceptions to now, like cross state reciprocity for physician licensing and things like that. Like, does that ever go away at some point down the road? How do they take it back? That's going to be a challenge. And when you think about all these patients moving around to all these different places and being discharged to Army field hospitals, I mean, who would have imagined? Wouldn't it be great if there was a single patient ID, whatever that looks like? Wouldn't it be great if there was a single patient ID to be able to keep track of all these people? And in the context of an epidemiological sense too, this would be a good time for us to think about how we're going to deal with that in a few months or however long it takes. It should be on our agenda for the near term.
Well, let's do this. We're coming up on time, but the last story I had here was on the American Enterprise Institute, and I have no idea who they are or what they stand for, but it was an interesting story. National Coronavirus Response, a roadmap to reopening, and it had 4 things: slow the spread, state by state reopening, establish immune protection and lift physical distancing, and then rebuild our readiness for the next pandemic, and then they had sub-points in each one of those. And instead of going into that story, because we're not physicians, I do want to talk about how we're thinking about, from a health IT standpoint, how we're thinking about moving forward from here, right? So eventually things will slow down, and this might be too early to really project some of this. It will slow down. How much of this it's interesting. We've been talking about the need for digital in healthcare for years, literally probably almost a decade, the need for digital. Well, it just happened in 4 to 8 weeks. I've now seen charts from CIOs who have shared them with me of their usage for telehealth, for their usage on their portals, their usage on just a whole host of digital.
30 times, 50 times increases in really short 2-week periods of time.
Yeah, it's not even a good hockey stick. It's like an uncomfortable hockey stick. It's going up so fast.
Yeah.
And so that's what we've been able to do. Is part of the role of the CIO moving forward to figure out how to sustain some of these things? Are we going to have, clearly we're going to have to see what the federal government does. If they, if those barriers come down, if they continue to reimburse telehealth, are we going to be able to sustain these kinds of telehealth gains that we've seen and these kinds of digital gains that we've seen over the last couple of weeks?
I hope so. I think, I had a conversation with a couple of CIOs the other day, and the conversation was sort of in the context of, how are we going to get all of the kids to come back to the farm now that they've been, off the farm for a while, in the context of work from home, in the context of telemedicine. And that was really quickly followed by sort of I'm not sure we want them to come back. I mean, in fact, maybe I'm pretty sure we don't want them to come back, right? Now, when you think about, Dan Nygren talked about this in your episode too, that we're not really exactly sure. There's a lot of telemedicine right now, and some of that may be just a very brief check-in to sort of hold somebody off from coming in, but they still really need to do an in-person appointment. And so we count that as a telemedicine visit, but it's not fully a replacement for what they really would like to do with the patient. There's some number of those in this telemedicine, ramp up to the hold on and don't come in. You're good enough. Just hold the fort. We'll talk to you again in a couple of weeks. But man, we seem to have, and I think that it's changing a lot of people's habits, not only the doctors and not only people who are in the health system that are working from home now, but a lot of patients too, who've become really clear about, I'm not sure I want to come to the clinic. I mean, that's where you get sick if you go to the clinic, or you get sick if you go to the hospital. Let's do telemedicine visit. That's better for everybody. I think we're going to get a lot more consumer demand. And we've already been talking about consumerization for a long time too. And this has also pushed the button on that part of our business.
So there's two things: work from home. I think it would be interesting to do a study. Well, actually, you don't even have to do the study. We've been working from home, and we've stood up just incredible amounts of stuff over the last 8 weeks, right? So IT has been more productive over the last 8 weeks than it probably has been in the last year and a half. Just in terms, and that just comes from a focus. Yes, focus, just a fine-tuned focus. And we've taken away there was sort of the regulatory burden was lifted, obviously, and then the money issue was raised, or was lifted. They just said, do what it takes to get everyone working from home. Do what it takes to get every doctor set up with telehealth. And in 8 weeks, we did that. So we can be incredibly productive working from home. Why would we put people back into a situation where they're going to commute for an hour? In some of these cities, that would be nice if it was only an hour. But if they're going to commute for an hour and they're going to take up really expensive real estate in some building, if we've proven that they can work this way,
the tables were turned on you the other day, and Ed Marks did an interview with you, and I watched that. And at some point, Ed said something like, why in the hell would people drive to use a computer? That doesn't make any sense to me. And that really has stuck with me. That makes a lot of sense. Why would you have somebody drive for an hour to come into an office to use a computer? Because they're a knowledge worker, and that's mostly what they're doing all day. I'm with you. I think kind of the last couple of weeks, and this is going to go on for a little while longer, it's going to change everything.
Yeah. Drex, thanks for coming on the show. It's always easier to talk through this stuff with you than to just pontificate for 30 minutes on my own. I love doing this. So thanks for doing it.
Thank you. You bet.
Special thanks to our sponsors, our channel sponsors, VMware, Starbridge Advisors, Galen Healthcare, Health Lyrics, ProTalent Advisors, for choosing to invest in developing the next generation of health leaders. This show is a production of This Week in Health IT. For more great content, check out the website, thisweekhealth.com, or the YouTube channel. If you want to support the show, best way to do it, refer it to a friend, share it with a peer. We're going to be back again every day this week. You're going to hear some from Drex this week, interviewing some chief security officers, information security officers, and we'll continue to do field reports as well with the CIOs. Thanks for listening. That's all for now.